all jerkbait fishing. That's what I fish a jerkbait on. Technique of the month for May, postpone weirdos all the time. 100% of the time it is on that particular setup. I love the action of that rod for it. That reel's the right speed in my opinion. 12-pound line just is the right line. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and we are here in the month of May, and we're talking about, you know, this month can be really good and some of it can be very straightforward fishing, but I feel like there's stuff that happens this time of the year and the fish can get just kind of in a funk. You know, maybe you get in between, you know, a group of fish moving out, there's not any more fish coming up to spawn maybe in your part of the country, so, but it's not quite summer where the fish aren't all out grouped up deep, and you've got the shad spawn in the mornings. It can be just a fire bite and can be a lot of fun, but it dies pretty quick, so it's like what happens the rest of the day. And to me this can be just kind of a weird time of year fishing. So technique of the month for May, postpone weirdos. That was the best thing I could come up with to kind of name this one, and a couple of baits that I feel like fit into that category pretty well. We're going to start with the one that's a moving bait, and something that I think you know, a lot of people don't really consider a lot post spawn. You know, we think of this a lot in the winter. We think of it a lot pre-spawn, but a lot of people put it up at that point in time and don't get it out a whole lot more the rest of the year, but can be very, very productive post spawn, and that is a jerkbait, a suspending jerkbait. Can really work on them this time of the year. You know, you've had that shad spawn in the morning. You know, that deal usually lasts a couple weeks from, you know, very start when you're first seeing it to when it's kind of really just the shad fry that are still hanging around. You know, 2 or 3 week window, I feel like it's kind of what you've got with a good shad spawn going on. Those shad are going to be up there right at daylight. You know, that's when that deal happens. That's when we're able to take advantage of it. Can be just a dynamite bite, really fast, really furious, catch a lot of fish that way. But it settles out, you know, and those fish calm down, the bait kind of scatters at that point in time. And that morning feed, they don't have to eat like that all day, right? You know, they're gonna settle down, they're not gonna be quite as aggressive. One of my favorite ways to catch them when they're doing that is floating boat docks. That's something that they really get around well. Those fish know, hey, in the morning, these shad are going to be right back here. We need to be right back here. There's no reason to go too very far away. I think a lot of times on a floating boat dock like that, those fish literally just sink straight down in the water column, hang right in the shade of that dock. They just go down, get a little bit deeper. If that dock's over really deep water, they don't go to the bottom, in my opinion. A lot of them end up spending a lot of their day suspended, just hanging in that shade line. That can be a great time to take a suspending jerkbait, get it down there to them, and be able to pick up a few more fish that way. Those fish, you know, maybe they slide out onto a point or something as well, and you can also take that suspending jerkbait out there and catch them doing that too. Good thing is, this isn't a time of year when you need to let that bait sit, you know, 5 or 10 seconds on the pause. This is the deal where twitch, let it sit a second or two, twitch, keep moving it. You know, you don't have to fish this bait slow like you do early in the year when that water's cold. You can definitely keep it moving a lot more. And I like that deeper bait. That's the Rapala Shadow Wrap Deep. This bait will run 8 foot or so on a good long cast on 12-pound fluorocarbon line, and it just allows me to be more versatile with that bait, as well as upsizing the hooks and making this thing sink. I can then pause the bait, let it sink down, and let it get down deeper if I want to. But the ability to get it to 4 or 5 feet quickly, fish it to 8 feet, makes it a very efficient bait for where I feel like those fish go a lot this time of the year. Seems like when they're being weird, that 8 to 12 foot range is kind of where they end up spending a lot of their time. And this is a bait that you're able to trigger a lot of those on that are on bait fish still. Now, while we're on the jerk bait, go ahead and switch over and tell you the rod reel setup that I use that on. If you see me throwing a jerk bait, it's on this setup. A lot like how I like the crank and stick for crankbaits. I don't vary a whole lot when it comes to a jerkbait. This is the Johnny Morse Patriot 6.6 medium action rod, Johnny Morse Platinum reel, 6/8 to 1 gear ratio, and a that's 12-pound test XPS fluorocarbon line is my setup for all jerkbait fishing. That's what I fish a jerkbait on all the time. 100% of the time, it is on that particular setup. I love the action of that rod for it. That reel's the right speed, in my opinion. 12-pound line just is the right line. That's what I fish a jerkbait on. Now, if you've watched anything that I've ever talked about much, and anybody's ever asked my least favorite technique, this is it right here, the old ball and chain. This is my least favorite technique of all fishing, what I probably despise the most. I don't dislike it because it's ineffective. I just dislike it because I dislike it. It's slow, it's monotonous. It's not anything I enjoy fishing. So that is why I just don't like a Carolina rig. One of my best buddies in the whole world is Andy Montgomery. He lives in Carolina. I don't have anything against Carolina. I just don't like the Carolina rig. But setup, pretty standard. I've got a bobber stop on here, really just for demonstration purposes, but I guess it could serve a purpose if you wanted to on a Carolina rig. But usually a 3/4 or 1 ounce sinker, plastic bead, barrel swivel, XPS fluorocarbon leader down to your VMC hook of choice. This is a new Redline 4/0 hybrid worm hook, and then a Bass Pro crack crawl on the back of that. I like that bulky bait with a lot of appendages. That's what I like on that dude. One place I mentioned using the jerkbait a little bit, but is especially effective with the Carolina rig, are secondary points. Those fish have spawned back in the coves, back in the pockets. They're not out in the summer where they're going to end up on the ledges or on the main lake points yet. They're in that in between. They're using docks as some of their cover on that migration routes out. They're using secondary points as part of their migration routes out. Those secondary points are places where a Carolina rig really, really shines for me this time of the year. Again, kind of that weird depth of that 8, 6, or 8 foot out to 12 or 15 foot is where a lot of those fish like to be. You've got, I think of our lakes here in East Tennessee, there's a lot of deep water. That deep water is actually still pretty cool this time of year. I mean, the surface temp may be reading 72, 75 degrees. Down there 20 foot, dude, that water is still in the 50s, upper 50s, maybe 60 degrees. It's still very, very cool. So much so that sometimes I think those fish don't want to immediately rush out there super deep. They want to kind of work their way out a little bit. And that's why I think that kind of odd depth is where those fish will hang up sometimes, is because that water on deeper is so much colder, they just don't immediately rush back out to it. But secondary points with any type of cover on them seems to be good. A little bit later in the year when those fish are set up in current, I don't know that cover is quite so important. This time of the year, I do like places that have a noticeable piece of cover. That can be a stump, that can be a brush pile, that can be a rock vein, could be a dock. But I do like a piece of cover, something for those fish to have to really be relating to during this time of the year. And it gives you as an angler something to focus on as well, whether that's throwing that jerkbait bite, whether it's dragging a Carolina rig bite. It seems like having a piece of cover for those fish to relate to is definitely a good thing. So look for that kind of stuff. Use your side imaging. It's a great place to do that. Use your 360 up on the front, to make a targeted cast to those pieces of cover. But drag that Carolina rig by them, twitch you a suspending jerkbait bite, and that's going to be a great way to catch some when it's kind of that weird time of year. They're not quite set up on that summertime structure yet where you're able to catch a big load of them, but you find those places in between, kind of pick you up 2 or 3 at each stop, and you'll have a good bag at the end of the day.